My fish should arrive tomorrow. My fish should arrive tomorrow. It's about 50, and then my share is about 50. About $10.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 31st, 2022 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. It's Halloween, and we have the birds and bees visiting us over here. Vanessa is online, and we're going to start off. I think Diana is talking to us about city manager evaluation process.
Good morning. I'm dressed up as your Human Resources Director today. So happy Halloween to you all. You look great, by the way. So I'm going to talk to you about the performance evaluation process for the city manager. I'm going to do an overview. We went through this overview last year, but it's always good to have a refresher and make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so for So we are going to cover the process evaluation, the performance evaluation process, criteria and legal considerations, and then we're going to talk about a 360 review process and what that looks like. So the process itself is defined in the city manager's employment agreement, that is in section 12, and it explains how the process is supposed to work. So the performance evaluation is supposed to occur annually. Typically, it's done in the November-December period. The process form, the criteria, the format, that's all agreed upon by council and the city manager. And then both council and the city manager will have the opportunity to prepare a written review. So the city manager can prepare a self-evaluation that kind of highlights some of the different areas of work throughout the year. You're going to meet and discuss during a one-on-one interview, and then present a written summary of the review results. So the final written review should be delivered to the city manager within 30 days of the review meeting, and this is all part of that employment agreement. So you're going to get an evaluation package. You probably have all already received your packets. Those go out normally around early November. That's going to have the documentation of the manager's performance, that self-evaluation piece, the employment contract, and that employment evaluation form that is used. So counselors will prepare their scores and comments based on the entire review period, which is a 12-month review period. So remember that when you're doing the evaluation, that's kind of the hardest part. You have to think about the entire 12-month period. It's really easy to think about the last couple of months. Same thing when I talk to supervisors who do the performance evaluation, kind of make sure that they're keeping notes throughout the year, because it's very hard to remember 12 months if you're not keeping yourself some notes throughout the year. The city recorder is going to receive that information and going to compile all of that information to a format for the city manager and the council president. So the city manager and the councilors are going to discuss the results of this evaluation feedback during one-on-one meetings. And then there will be an executive session that will be held where the council president will present that information to the council for discussion at that time. Now, the city manager can request an open meeting instead of having it in an executive session. That is something that is permissible. And during those discussions regarding the evaluation, the mayor may also offer comments during that time. So the city manager is provided with an opportunity to address council regarding compensation during that executive session. If council wishes to discuss the compensation in a more private session, they can ask the city manager to leave the room while that occurs. So when you get into the evaluation criteria, so what council's actually going to be evaluating the city manager on, these are the agreed upon categories that are in the performance evaluation form that you all receive at the beginning of the process. And so that's the management of the organization, and there's a definition under each of these on the evaluation form. The execution of policy, financial management, relations to council, community relations, communication, leadership, and professionalism. So the evaluation criteria is going to be based upon the essential functions or the job duties of the city manager. Those job duties are actually defined in the city charter. So for general employees that work for the city, you're going to see their job classification or job descriptions that are going to be posted online. The city managers is defined in the charter under Section 2, Item 3. I don't know if you want me to read through all of these bullet points here, but specifically, it is to discharge his official duties, to attend all council meetings unless he's excused, to keep council advised of affairs, and to report as requested by the council on affairs and different department progress throughout the city. So if there's certain things that are going on with certain departments and council is requesting information on that, he would provide that feedback. Make sure all ordinances are enforced. All of these things are going to go through their department directors in the different divisions, obviously. To hire and remove employees, the city manager is considered the personnel officer and is responsible for those. To provide general supervision and control over employees and their work, that is typically done through your department directors, your department supervisors, to ensure that everything is being done properly. To supervise the departments to the end of obtaining efficiency. To act as the purchasing agent, to prepare and submit to the budget committee, we see that every year, and to supervise the operations of our public utilities. So under the evaluation guidelines, one thing that's very important is that we are timely, meaning that everybody is getting all of their information together so that it can all be compiled and it can be presented on time as planned. That it's based on the essential job duties, those job duties that are defined in the charter for the city manager. That it's based on the agreed performance criteria, that is the criteria that is on the performance evaluation form and is identified and defined there. It's for the entire evaluation period, not just the last couple of months, but try to remember as much as you can on the data that you've collected over the 12-month period. And that it's factual, based on actual performance with specific details. So it's very important when you're putting a rating onto performance that you have actual examples of the performance that you're rating. To simply say that somebody's a 5 because they're a great person, well, we're not evaluating the person, we're evaluating their performance. Or a 1 because of one particular incident without giving any context to that. That doesn't give this person the opportunity to perform better in that area if they don't have a clear picture of the performance that you are rating. So the evaluation should include praise for accomplishments, So accomplishments may also be efforts. As you all know, we don't always accomplish the tasks that we set out to, but we may be making effort towards accomplishing those tasks. Some of what we plan for are multi-year projects, and they're not going to get done in a one-year period when you're evaluating a person. So you're going to evaluate based upon the effort that's been put forth. You're going to give the employee the accolades that are going to help them keep moving forward in the direction that you wish that they continue to move. As well, you're going to document any corrective action that's been taken or any deficiencies that you feel like require some growth. So if there's been conversations throughout the year about certain things that need to be done that haven't yet been done, then there might need to be some growth in that particular area. You're going to want to be specific enough about the conversations that have been had and the growth that is expected so that the person being evaluated knows, okay, I need to get some more training in this particular area. I need to reach out to this particular group and start building this relationship. Whatever the situation might be, it's enough information for success in the following year. And that's going to go as well with the areas of growth that would be beneficial to the employee's success. Maybe you already see some areas where the employee is strong, but you think, gosh, if they were a little bit stronger in this particular category, I really think that they could really do well. And so you might want to recommend some particular training or some other type of area, maybe that they're even going to identify what's going to help them grow better in that so that they can be even better than they currently are. When you're looking at the guidelines, you also have to consider what should not be part of the performance evaluation. Of course, you know, no protected information, and you already know what all of that is because we've gone over that before, but any of those areas that are protected, we don't even consider. It shouldn't be based on personal opinions without supporting facts. So we definitely want to look at the performance, not our personal opinion. We don't want to be vague or generic. I already went over that. The employee needs enough information to know why you're rating them well or why you aren't so that they can then improve or continue to excel. It shouldn't be the first time the city manager learns of a deficiency or a concern in an area of performance. If there has been an area of performance that there has been concern with or a challenge with, or something that has been bothersome to you throughout the year, that needs to be discussed with the city manager during one-on-one meetings so that the city manager is aware and is able to overcome those challenges if that's possible. And it should also not contain any offensive statements or terms or any form of sarcasm. That's not going to serve very well in a performance evaluation to help guide the employee. So the evaluation, after you've gone through this whole process, you've sit down, you evaluated the work, hopefully you're looking back through some of your notes, maybe you're looking back through the city's quarterly work plan, you're looking back at some of the council meetings, what are the things that we have accomplished during this year with the city manager, and you're taking all of this into consideration, you're completing your performance evaluation. Once that is done, then the evaluation is discussed and finalized in that executive session. It should represent the collective voice of council, not individuals, but as of the whole council. The evaluation will then be adopted at a council meeting, and then following the completion of the review process is when the council and the city manager can get together to discuss the process and criteria. Kind of what we're getting ready to do when you're looking at this 360 process. Is that something you want to consider? When you're looking at the current evaluation process, are there areas in that evaluation that you struggled with that maybe need to be better defined or redefined? The time to talk about those things is with the city manager once that evaluation has been completed. So that November, December period before we get started into that new year. So just want to see if there's any questions about the performance evaluation process.
Rob?
Thanks, Diana. So it says somewhere here, and you said that the process forms criteria for the review have been mutually agreed upon by council and city manager. And I'm just wondering, so whenever that agreement happened, because I never agreed to this process, I'm just wondering, is that in perpetuity, that agreement? I mean, meaning that some council prior to when I was on thought that the questions were appropriate, but at least 3 of the questions that we're supposed to answer talk about the organization, and yet we have no window into the organization, no official window. So I'm just wondering, when you said mutually agreed on, was that agreement in perpetuity, or can that agreement change?
That agreement can change through discussion with council and the city manager. So Aaron, you would have to help me out on this particular one because I don't know when this current form came into.
We recently, not recently, I don't know, I'm looking at Valerie also because it was maybe 5 years ago that we went through and we reworked the performance evaluation of the city manager from what it was. And what that consisted of is it consisted of at the time, the current council president, who I think was Valerie, the past president, who was Dennis, and then myself. And the council members and myself did research throughout the area, throughout Oregon and other areas, and other organizations, what they did for their CEO, city manager type of position, what classifications they had, what criteria they had, and then we updated that. We did make some changes. I think there used to be like 9 or 12 or something categories, and now we broke it down to I think 7 or 8. So we did condense some of them. We further defined some of them. And ultimately, if council wants to look at reworking a evaluation for the city manager, that would be a good potential starting point, is to get maybe the past president and council president, current or whatever, city manager to go through and form a small subcommittee to take a look at revamping the form based on direction from council.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thank you. On the very last slide, the last bullet, it talks about council and the city manager discussing the evaluation process for the following year. And I could have swore when we did this last year, we were told any changes needed to be made before the evaluation process was done for the next year. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear that if we're going to make changes, that it can come after the evaluation process, because I don't remember that being the case last year.
It needs to come at the beginning of this process. Would it be great to start having a conversation maybe back in October and November where you're ready to go with a brand new process in December? But you're starting the beginning of a process right now. You're just getting into these conversations right now. And so if in November, December, right at the beginning of this process, criteria is being modified or updated, that's going to give the city manager the information that is needed for the that performance year. So yeah, maybe during that very first month of performance, which might be right there in the very beginning of December, the criteria may have switched up a little bit. But it's so hard to remember 12 months already, right? But so you would have that criteria set and then move forward.
It came up months ago, just to be clear. So we've been told that it needs to be kind of a part of this new contract. So that's why we're doing it now.
It does need to be adopted towards the beginning of that new evaluation process. And let me make sure I'm clear. So if it was brought up months ago about changing the process, you don't want to change the process mid-evaluation period because the person didn't have notice of what those expectations were during that evaluation period. So I might want to clarify that a little bit better. So if you're making those changes right in the very beginning of the evaluation period, the employee knows what to anticipate and what's expected for that upcoming year.
Okay, so once the evaluation process for this year is over, the new evaluation period has begun. Is it okay to change it after the new evaluation period has begun, even, based on what you said, that we shouldn't do that? That's why I'm saying, should it be changed before the new evaluation period has begun?
You should be setting these standards for this upcoming evaluation period during this November-December period so that the employee has that full 12 months really in order to be able to work under the defined criteria. So you're going to be adopting, I'm going to guess, the performance evaluation sometime in probably December. You'll have your executive session most likely in November, and then you'll have a meeting to adopt the performance evaluation in December. That's your new starting point where you're going to be moving forward. So you would want to be, if you decide that there is criteria that needs to be updated or a process that needs to be changed, creating that committee and working with the city manager, starting that November, December period.
Okay, so we have the evaluation on November 16th, and then we have the resolution adopting the evaluation on December 7th. So does it need to be between those two dates that we figure that out?
No, I don't think that you're going to have enough time between those two dates to get it all figured out, but you need to be in discussion about what that is going to look like so that you can get that put into place. It would be a very good idea to have it completed by the end of December, have a pretty good understanding of where you want to be at that particular point so that he can move forward in this next calendar year.
Okay, great. FYI, December 7th is our final meeting of December, and then we're not meeting until January.
Rob?
Well, I appreciate that line of thought, Brian. I would also say that I would imagine that if it was mutually agreed on between the manager and the council, that we could have a 3-month period that isn't included in the 360 process. In other words, if our changes for the evaluation process, need to take longer than through December 7th, that we could start next year's evaluation any date that we mutually agreed on. We could start it in January or February or whenever. So there's no reason that we have to be, I'd like to get it done quickly if we're going to make any changes. I don't know if that we're going to go there, but there's absolutely no reason that we couldn't make that decision effective January 15th or February 15th. So, that's a good guideline to try to get it done now, but that, that's not something that is required of the council. So we can basically take the time that we need to do it well. I suppose Aaron could object to that. I don't know that he would or wouldn't, but in other words, I don't think that it's etched in stone that we got to get it done by December 7th.
Any other questions? All right, Diana?
Okay. So let's look at a 360 review. So this was brought up as an idea for a conversation about a 360 review and what that would look like. So a 360 review is typically used, it's a survey. Most of the time it's going to go out through either a paper survey or an electric survey to collect information. It's going to be sent out to an employee's coworkers, subordinates, other stakeholders, which could be community members. Those folks, those stakeholders, those individuals would have to be defined by the group that was looking to do the 360 review. It is intended to provide the employee with data to support their strengths and also give them areas to focus for development. If you go out and you look up a 360 review, you're probably going to find about, 100, 150 or more different options on how you can do these. When you are collecting information under a 360 review, in my opinion, the 360 review should be done to collect information for a development plan and not to rate the employee. The reason that it's not used as a rating tool is because the individuals who are returning the feedback on a 360 review don't necessarily have the training or the understanding of how to appropriately rate somebody. So it should be a feedback tool. It should then be combed through, the information should be combed through to find themes that are going to be appropriate and meaningful so that they can be actionable. So when I say themes, it's when you get this information back from these different sources, you're looking, do we have somebody who's really strong in communication, and this would be a great area for them to expand on, to do more of what we're already seeing. Is this a person who needs to develop their written skills? Maybe their communication in writing isn't as clear as it could be. Are you seeing these kind of themes from all of these different sources that are coming in? So when you go through the 360 review method, First, you have to have a collective goal. So what is the information that you're wanting to collect from this group of individuals that you send out? Because you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions in order to get the right information back. You're going to have to choose who's going to contribute to that information. Is that citizens? Is it businesses? Is it employees? Is it coworkers? Is it all of the above? You're going to send out a survey. It has to have clear instructions and training. It has to have a contact person, so if people don't understand what they're doing, they have somebody to contact. It needs to be very clear and geared towards performance and not personality, right? We want to know how this person is performing the essential duties of whatever goal or purpose it is that you have focused on. You send the survey to the employee for self-review. It's always good to get feedback from the individual that you're doing the 360 on as to where they feel like they stand. And they also need to know the questions that are being asked. You should have one person who's collecting the data, going through that data, looking for those themes, and then clarifying unclear survey input. So sometimes, and I looked up a number of the different 360 evaluations, you will find some of them that say that it is best to do them in an anonymous manner so that if people are concerned about their responses, that they'll go ahead and send them knowing that they're not going to be identified. You cannot clarify unclear survey results if you don't know who sent in the data. So I don't believe that anonymous is a good way to do any survey. If you have one person that's going to be collecting the data and going through the data and is able to clarify the information that is coming back in, then the individual who is providing information already has their information protected. You don't want to be sending out raw data that is coming back in the first place. You're going to provide a summary of the information collected through the survey after it has already been gone through and summarized to the employee and to the manager and council. Discuss the feedback with the employee, allowing input from the employee, and then create a development plan for the upcoming period. So like I said, the purpose of the 360, if you have that goal, is then create a plan from it, not to use it as a rating tool. So a 360 review process can be conducted internally using survey tools that we already have available to us. Again, it should be one individual collecting the information and then evaluating the data for themes. You'll notice in some of the information that was sent out on Friday, there are many external consultants who do 360 reviews. If an external consultant is hired, they are typically going to be an unbiased, impartial individual who is coming in specifically trained to help design a process and evaluate the data. And they're going to create guided questions. You're trying to avoid opinions of character and keep that focus on performance. How is a person performing a job? A consultant would typically be a good person to do that. They would also be receiving the information from individuals who would be identified, so they would be able to get a hold of them to get clarification on information. One of the challenges when you're dealing with a 360 review is that you have to remember that managers aren't in their jobs for popularity. And so you're going to get sometimes that mix of information that's going to come in where people don't agree with decisions that have been made that may not have been made by that individual, but they had to carry out those decisions regardless. And so that's part of the reason why you have to have that information to be able to follow up as well.
Questions? Looks like we have no questions right now. Oh, Rick, go ahead.
So thank you, Diana. So if one thing, right now we have 4 categories: excellent, good, fair, and poor. And I guess I would like to see very good put in there because I feel like good is right in the middle, then you have 2 below that. But when you go from good and above, you only have 1 more category. So I think that would give a better opportunity for a range of providing input.
So you'd like to have a more expanded range, which is definitely something that council could discuss with the city manager in reworking the performance evaluation. We actually took the city's employee performance evaluation down to 4 from what was 5 before. So it all depends upon kind of the groups that are discussing it on what they prefer, so.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie?
I was just going to add that we did the same. We used to have 5, and when we changed it, we went down to 4 because it was kind of, we felt it was somewhat redundant anyway, but that was one of the changes we made as well, as to go down back to 4.
It makes you choose something either slightly better or less than neutral is the reason for having 4.
Yeah, you'll often get the 3 right down the middle if people are having a difficult time deciding, and I think that's what sometimes was seen.
Other questions? All right. Thanks, Diana. Discussion, council? Rob?
Well, I've always appreciated the thoroughness and professionalism Diana's exhibits for a lot of years here. When she mentions the reasons to potentially consult with an outside service to do a 360 review, everything that she mentioned to me kind of tells me that if we were going to do a 360 review at all, it needs to be done from an external provider. Right now, we have at least 3 of the performance criteria that we're supposed to rate the city manager on use the word organization in them. And we don't have any official window, as counselors, we don't have an official window into the organization. None, 0. We're not necessarily supposed to. If we have discussions with department heads, they're generally of a brief nature. They're generally something that that person can provide for us with 5 minutes of minimal, minimal investigation. So we have a minimum of interaction with staff when it comes to performance kinds of issues or problems of any kind. So as a result, we have really no input or really no insight into the organization. So there's at least 3 questions that we currently have that we can't, I don't believe we can answer. And last year, I made that clear, at least on one of them, and we didn't change it. But a 360 review would give us some insight, depending on how it's done and so forth. So I'm definitely in favor of having a 360 review, and I would also be in favor of something that gives us a little bit of a window that we could probably do right now, and that's just on a quarterly basis or whatever, see a copy of all the exit interviews, see why people might be leaving employment here. So that gives us some insight, because we have none. If somebody quits, we don't know. We don't know what happened. It might have been they wanted to avoid the smoke in the summers. It might have been that they got a much better job offer somewhere else, or it might have been some other reason. So exit interviews on a quarterly basis, I think, would be helpful. I think all council would have to do is vote on that, and we could probably make that happen. But I'm definitely for the 360 review concept, because I think it's going to be another tool to have councilors have some insight. I think if it was done professionally, I think it could really be valuable. I mean, professionally from an external provider. I just see if we try to do it ourselves, like the other night when we had, or the other day when we had 8 councilors weighing in on the remodeling of a building downtown, we all had different ideas. I think if we try to do it internally, we're probably going to have 8 different councilors have ideas of what questions are appropriate, what are not. We're going to have Diana telling us how we should weigh them or not weigh them. And then, of course, we've got the obvious, human nature, potential for conflict of interest between her and Aaron, et cetera. And I'm not saying that either one of them is dishonest. I'm saying it's human nature to want to please the people you work with. So I think that external is the way to go. The question is how to choose somebody. Obviously, we'd want to choose someone very experienced, and we'd want to have some input or better understanding as to what questions they would typically ask, and hopefully they would ask us as counselors what our concerns may or may not be. But that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Val?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back, and I know that, originally when we looked at it in the past and did some changing around. That was kind of my thought too, is it's really hard to know, when they come to the questions that ask how internally things are going, because we don't see anything. And it's obviously, I'd like to think that if there was something really, just saw myself on TV. Anyway, so I would really like to think that if something massive is going on, we would obviously see it. So that, we did ask about the 360 review. Kind of what we heard was what Diane said, was that it should be used not necessarily as a rating tool, but as input tool for him as well as us to know. So I'm not opposed to that idea, and I agree, but the only way I would do it if it was an outside person that was willing to come in and kind of do something, because you're right. And right now, if you were to look at the number of people that have left in the last few years, you could think horrendous things are happening, but you go out anywhere in the world and find out everybody's dealing with the same thing. So like I said, I would only do something to kind of get an idea if it was done from somebody on the outside who knew what they were doing, and use it as just a piece of the, and not even rating, but just to see as a growth tool for Aaron and as a growth tool for the council as well.
Brian?
I agree with Rob and Valerie.
Rick?
I also support that direction. I think it's healthy every few years to look at a process that you do have and make sure it's up to date, but also just to give the opportunity for additional input both ways, for the council as well as for the city manager. Thank you.
DJ?
I'll be a voice of opposition here. I don't think that a 360 review would be appropriate at this time per se. One of the primary reasons I believe that is that this is brought up in the conversation of an evaluation process. And correct me if I'm wrong, there was management of the organization was an issue that wrought this idea. So I'm not sure if we have an issue of input or ability to evaluate the manager, considering that it's a dynamic process throughout the year. I think that we might have an issue with how the evaluation is structured. And I think that I would be in favor of looking at that prior to a 360 review. I think we could pull this off and satisfy some of the issues that have with the evaluation process. And I have issues with the evaluation process. I think that would be a more appropriate starting point. So that's what I could get behind, but I don't think that a 360 is necessarily appropriate at this time.
Okay, I have a question about the timeline. I guess I'm still not clear as far as the evaluation process goes. If we have December 7th as the date for adopting the current evaluation, what is the timeline for implementing a new process?
I think what Diana mentioned is if we were to take a look at, do a subcommittee on looking at an evaluation or something along those lines, as long as we're working towards that. It didn't take us very long in the first place when we modified ours with a council direction on areas that they'd like to see improved on. It wouldn't take, I think, more than 2 months to put something together and get it back in front of council. And I think if that direction was given in November or December, then we can get that accomplished and could potentially have something different for your approval in January or 1st of February, which I think still meets the spirit of the majority of the year being evaluated on a known process. And I also want to mention that as a credentialed city manager, I already participate in 360 evaluations. I think 360s are valuable. I will be looking at doing one within the next 12 months for my credentialed manager certificate. And so I adhere to that process and policy. I think they're extremely important for professional development, but I do not believe they are an evaluation tool. and don't agree that that is a tool for evaluation. So I just wanted to let you know that I do 360s, and I think they're important, and I take that information as a professional growth item, not as an evaluation tool.
So it sounds like you've already done that in the past as well?
Yes,
And was that information shared with council or just with you?
it was with me because it's a professional development tool for me, and it was not a performance evaluation tool for city council.
Interesting. Okay. Rick?
If the 360 evaluation is not, I would say, personal, is it appropriate, even if we don't see yours, to just see an example to say that's something we like or don't like? Because obviously we have one method before us, and yet is that something, because you're saying it's a total different entity.
Yeah, my thought process is that, again, a 360 is great for a professional development tool, and that there are different evaluation tools that can be utilized for CEO, city manager type of position. And I believe that there is always room for improvement, and we could take a look at the evaluation tool and try to take a look at how we can make it better so you feel more comfortable about the different areas that you're wanting to evaluate the senior manager for.
Okay, and what I'm trying to say is if the 360 is not appropriate, if we understood it better, we may say we don't want it included, but I also hear you saying if the council wants more voice, then maybe incorporating aspects of that may work in the evaluation, even though it's typically not an evaluation tool. Is that correct perspective? Or?
No, I guess I would still adhere to keeping them separate. A 360 is a personal performance personal performance plan, and an evaluation is an evaluation of performance.
So if we personally want to express to you concerns, your door is always open, and we can always come up to you and say, we feel you're weak in this area, and therefore you can then respond to that. But normally we don't have the opportunity to participate in the 360 because that is a separate area. And I'm hearing some of us may like different aspects of that to be included in the evaluation, but you said it's, so I guess I'm not having intimate knowledge of the 360 to say.
Oh yeah, well, my 360, I do get either the mayor and or a council president also to participate in my 360. So that is part of the process. So in my upcoming 360, I'll be asking for input from the mayor or council president to participate in the 360 evaluation.
So I guess I'm sort of feeling that might be helpful for council to realize the input the mayor and the council president are providing, because if we're looking for growth, then we have an opportunity to provide our input to them for that growth. Okay, thank you.
Is there any sort of other tool besides this 360 that you do that's an internal feedback of the organization that's being done?
We do, trying to be a high-performing organization. We're always trying to get feedback from our colleagues, whether it be through the different meetings we have or et cetera, along with surveys. And we've done surveys in the past to try to get a temperature on the culture that we're developing within the organization. HR currently right now is also working on an employee satisfaction survey, which we'll be getting out shortly, asking the employees about their satisfaction for being here in the organization, which will give us some key I think, tools and helpful tools and information to help improve areas, whether it be departments or divisions, or focus on building our high-performing organization when it comes to system integration of process.
And does the council have any access to see any internal feedback, I guess?
Yeah, we've done that in the past also with some of our surveys. We've provided input to council on a report on our internal surveys to let you know, hey, these are our findings. This is where we think that we have strengths. This is where we think we're building, and that's just part of the city manager being giving you a report on that, and that wouldn't be an issue to share with council at all.
Vanessa, then Brian, then Rob.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. I do also support modifying the evaluation to include a 360 review. I do see that it serves two purposes. It provides a organizational perspective that we do not have, as Councillor Pell had outlined, into the city manager's performance from the perspective that we don't have access to. And I think it can also serve as a developmental tool once it's completed. So I do see that it serves those two purposes equally. And I do support moving forward with bringing in outside assistance to complete the process annually.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
I'll pass.
Rob?
I timed my bite to have Brian say something. Now I got to swallow. So, out of curiosity, Aaron, when you had the employee satisfaction survey, were those done anonymously or are names attached to those?
We've done a little bit of both, and so I think the satisfaction survey, I'm not sure, I think it's going to, yeah, we're going to have names associated with the new satisfaction survey.
Okay. I guess you could make a strong case, I guess, that both would be valuable. I mean, for obvious reasons, right? And then I'm also wondering, is that type of survey like multiple choice, or is there any space for people to write whatever they want?
So it's a combination. The reason that we ask for names is because we do have actually we use our Microsoft system, which will collect names. But it has a free-form text field for people to provide us some details regarding particular suggestions, which can't multi-choice questions to solicit information back. So when we're asking about the benefits, the work hours, the working condition, work-life balance, the job satisfaction, we can do a lot of multi-choice in that, but when we're asking for suggestions, we have that as free form. And so sometimes that takes some clarification, just like we just did a survey related to open enrollment and what employees would like to see during this open enrollment period, and a bunch of questions have come back in. So we've had the opportunity to be able to respond back and say, oh, I didn't realize you didn't know this, and send them the information that they were looking for. So it's a combination.
Anybody else? No hands up? Rob?
So, Diana, you had outlined, I guess, from Boise Cascade, there was 3 different levels of review and 3 different people, and I guess maybe, I'm not exactly sure how that company decided on different levels of 360 review. I understand it was upper management and middle management and so forth. I'm just wondering, do we have any idea what some service like that might cost? And do we have any idea, would we necessarily, if we chose to do it, choose the highest level that company used, or would the middle level suffice? Or do you have any insight on any of that?
Since we were trying to get feedback as quickly as possible, I had put information out on LinkedIn to some of my contacts there to try to get some input from the private sector as to what they might do. That's how I got that information. I don't have any costing, but from what I understood from their response was that it was depended on the level of feedback that they, on the volume of feedback that they wanted to get related to specific areas of performance or of the organization or how the oversight is occurring. So that higher level position, they wanted more feedback. The mid-level was a little bit less. So it sounds like the costs kind of went along with that as well because of the amount of data that the consultants are going through. And so I don't know what the cost is, but I understood that it was based on the amount of information that they were going to be asking.
So that makes sense. And I would imagine that if we were to essentially choose someone, if the council were to interview someone for that, I would imagine there'd be a back and forth, and they would tell us all the things that they normally would do, or they would recommend. We could probably voice our concerns and probably come up with I would imagine, a plan that's tailored to whatever it is we turn out to like or want. I'm just imagining that they don't have just boilerplate Plan 1, Plan 2, or Plan 3. They'd probably tailor it for our organization's shape and size, so to speak.
I would expect the same because they would want to know what the organization's goal is, what you're trying to find out. So I'm sure that they already have a large database of questions based upon different categories that they're looking at, but that's what I would expect as well.
Well, we've had 5 counselors have indicated that they are interested in some sort of outside external consultant in order to get more internal feedback. I guess what that says to me is that council's feeling a disconnect between what's going on within the organization and what they hear as council. So as we talk about it being linked to the evaluation, is there some sort of timeline? I mean, there's really no reason why the 360 or something of that nature would need to be timed, to happen like next November, right? I mean, I think they're wanting a point in time look at what's going on within the organization. So theoretically, it could happen much sooner, and then it wouldn't be directly linked to the evaluation process, but it would provide council with that information about the organization. I don't know if there's any feedback about that, Val?
Yeah, in one way, I agree with that, because I think that by having it like right at the end, it makes it a part of it. And I think basically, from my own perspective, I don't want it necessarily to be the rating, but I think it's an important piece of information for the council to know, because it's no different than we talked about. The door's always open to Aaron. You can always go in and tell him something that you're upset with. I think everybody in here at some point in time has gone in and talked with him about something that they felt unsettled about. So I think that's there, but I just would kind of like to know that piece of how the internal, how people feel, whether they're listened to and that sort of thing, and that should be at a different time than the evaluation. I mean, that's my thought, is it's a tool, but it's not a tool for evaluation. So I would even say, I don't know if it's last year or the year before, there was information, and maybe it's in the one-on-one, I don't know, because I haven't gone to mine yet, where he talked a little bit about his I value and some of the things that he has done with building the culture of the organization. And it's, like I said, it's been a little bit messy in the last 2 years with as many people gone as there have been, and I don't know if they've found that to be difficult because of the circumstances, but I would rather not have it in November, but would rather have it at a different time and just know that's one piece of the process that we do throughout the year to make ourselves a better organization.
Did you have a comment, Diana?
Just based on what you had asked and what you had said is really what you were talking about is an organizational 360. So we're not talking about a 360 review on an individual. We're talking about the organization overall and really doing a much more broad picture of how the organization is operating. That's kind of what I heard you saying.
Maybe, I don't want to make huge assumptions about what the individual counselors are interested in, but I think, one thing that I'm hearing is that there is a disconnect. Our window is through Aaron, and
based on sort of what Valerie was talking about, that would be something that I would like to explore with council and trying to develop something along those lines. I think that could be an appropriate tool. Of course, it'd be an appropriate tool for myself and all the ex-team and members of the organization, but it also provides you with some additional insight on the organization itself, which I think would be healthy.
Brian?
So that's not necessarily my interpretation of what we've been discussing. I think the whole reason this came up was because council has no window into the organization's, we're asked to rate Aaron on his management of the organization, and we have no idea how he manages the organization because we only deal with Aaron. So personally, I thought we were talking about a 360 review. At the school district, for the past couple of years, I've been fighting to have a 360 review, and we finally got one done last year. And the insights that we received were invaluable. The board got invaluable insight from that 360 that we fought for 2 years. I see us missing a piece of information here to perform our evaluations, and the 360 seems like the most straightforward way for us to get that information. So we either need to we either need to revamp our entire evaluation process, or we need to have a tool to allow us to see into the organization, because we can't right now. We have no way of doing that. And so we're not able to properly evaluate the city manager and his management of the organization as it sits right now.
Rob?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Right now, if you think about the input that we as counselors can get, it could be accurate. It could be some of the most inaccurate information you'd ever get anywhere. If I talk to, we'll say someone involved in the Home Builders Association, for as long as I want to stay on the phone, they might complain about so many things being wrong in the planning department. Well, that's, one person or maybe one industry's view. And that could be the same in any department. Very often you're going to hear, excuse my language, bitch sessions or things of that nature, because that's what's going to stand out in somebody who wants to speak up or wants to bend a counselor's ear. It may or may not be, in a vacuum it may be accurate, but in context it may not be. So for us to try as 8 individual counselors to actually try to get insight, I don't see any real way for us to do that if we're going to try to get information that we're supposed to look at as somewhat unbiased and somewhat helpful and somewhat accurate. So having some external person or external entity help us with that, I just don't see a way for us to do it, because we're going to gravitate towards the people, each individual counselor is going to gravitate towards the people they're more comfortable speaking with. So we might have 8 separate groups we're talking to, but we need to look at this from a bigger perspective, and I think from an outside perspective as well.
Is that your hand, Kurt? Go ahead.
So I'll share this whole story, and you can read into it whatever you wish. Back in my marketing days, company perception was everything. And because my sales team and I had direct contact with the customers all the time, we would get the feedback back, and I was the channel back to management. And management didn't always want to hear bad news, right? So sometimes they would ignore things I said. And so I went out to management and I said, I want to do a customer survey. And they paid for it, of course, but I was in control of it. So you're darn sure I got the answers back I wanted, and then I use it as a blunt force weapon back to management. So, you know, I guess the point I'm making here is that surveys can be a tool, and the person wielding the tool is the one who controls the survey and controls the results they get. So I would just caution everybody to be careful about your motivations here, and that's why I would definitely go to a third party to do this.
I think everybody who's spoken up was in favor of the third party. I guess it's just a little bit, maybe of honing what your goal is and whether you see it as part of the, maybe specifically as part of the manager's evaluation process or as more of a 360 of the organization. Rob?
Yeah. Well, I think that since none of us are really professionals in that area, I think the thing to do would be to hear from you know, a top person, a professional in that field, and they may be able to guide us as far as what our options are and how things can be used in different ways for different benefit. So, you know, we could take forever figuring out exactly what we think we want, but we don't have any experience.
Yeah.
So I think we should try to hire someone that's going to guide us through that process. 8 of us can get input, or 9 of us can get input, and we can also get, you know, their response to what our concerns are. And I'm sure that they'll give us ideas that we never thought of. So that's what we need to work that out, in my opinion, how exactly it's used based on the advice we get from a professional.
I agree, but it does have a timeline element if we're linking it directly to the evaluation process so that we don't end up having this conversation again next year.
Well, what I said earlier, I think is still true, is that we could agree that we're going to have a 9-month period of evaluation. It doesn't have to necessarily be 365 days to the next evaluation. It's kind of up to everyone in this room. So we can take the time to hire somebody, have them help us, and then if we have 11 months left or 10 months left, we'll call it a 10-month 360 review rather than a 12-month the first year. That would be my opinion. That would be my suggestion.
I guess, is your personal goal in the 360 to link it directly to the manager's evaluation process?
I think that, frankly, it's human nature that if somebody gives me information about Aaron that seems really valuable, positive or negative, it is probably going to, you know, be in my brain when I do an evaluation form. But I would like to hear from an outside professional if they think it should be, why it should be or why it shouldn't be. Because that I'm sure would actually sway my opinion when I actually hear from someone with a lot more experience than I have. But I also think that, you know, it's going to be in my mind if a huge number of employees had a similar, if there was a similar trend, positive or negative, how could I ignore it if, you know, it'd be impossible to ignore. I'm not a computer. So, but I'd like to hear what an outside professional advises us and how they think the tool could be used, and that'll help me decide.
Okay, would you say that in order to move forward on this, because it sounds like the majority are interested in having some sort of review with an external consultant, do you need more specifics at this time in order to move forward with that, or? I don't know if it'd be Aaron or Diana who.
I have a general idea of where you're wanting to go. Ultimately, if you're wanting to do an outside and it's agreed upon by the city manager also, then we would bring in and do an RFP for professional services to bring someone in, providing some of that criteria. Again, I will express my opinion that a 360 should not be part of the evaluation. And I do have the ability, and I hope the respect of council, to have that recognized, that it is supposed to be a mutually agreed upon evaluation process. But with that, I can move forward with some additional information for you to get some additional information or look at the next step of bringing in a consultant that would provide some kind of service along what you've discussed.
Okay, it might be helpful for me, I guess, just to have the counselors run back through if you're interested in having it primarily focus on the organization or on the manager. And I think personally, it might be hard to not have the organizational 360 touch on the manager, but do you want the focus to be on the city manager or on the organization? Who's going to start? Joel?
So I've managed several large organizations with a lot of employees, and I'm really a strong advocate of management by wandering around, where you go around and you listen to your employees. And you are or not? I say I am. And there's a book called that, I think it was by Hewlett Packard, I'm not sure, Management by Wandering Around. But anyway, in my experience, when you have a formal process like that, the people that are in performance improvement plans, or maybe the people that are going to get fired, you get one feedback, and I'm not sure it's accurate. And then on the other hand, if you have a manager who is maybe even too lenient, depending on the employee, you get another feedback. And then there's also another tool that can be used effectively, that if there is some accusation or something that, and there hasn't been any since I've been on the council, but if there was, then you appoint an investigator, and they actually go and investigate what the facts are. And that is a good way to balance the power. So if we're looking at performance evaluations, and I look at what can happen with the 360 reviews, and then how we interpret that from any specific group or any specific individual, it can be a misleading. On the other hand, that management by wandering around and getting feedback on weaknesses and strengths, not only of the individual, but the organization, is extremely valuable and essential. So, and that can result not only in development of a city manager or a district ranger or whatever, it can also result in improvement of the skills of the organization, of the people in the parks, or in planning, or legal, or whatever, so that those improvements are made. And so I find that extremely valuable. I'm not sure I find it valuable as an evaluation thing in terms of adding something that I probably already know. But that's just me, and what I've seen and what I've experienced, both as an evaluator and a manager.
I'm not sure that I followed where you stand on a 360 review.
I think it's very good for development, and both employee development and manager development. In terms of me using it as an evaluation tool for any one individual, wherever they are in the organization, I think that can be misleading.
So you would be in support of doing an organizational 360?
I'm not sure what you want to call it, but I would do a 360 to where it would result in development plans and training, and then if something else comes up that needs investigation, then that would be investigated.
I guess I'm trying to parse out for, the purpose of Aaron and Diana as we move forward on this, whether we're thinking of this specifically as being an evaluation tool of the manager, or looking at insights into the organization.
So let me be really direct then. I don't think we should use it as an evaluation tool of any particular employee at any level in the organization. I think we need to use it as a developmental tool. And if there's some information that pops up in terms of evidence that needs to be taken care of, there's a separate process for handling that.
Okay. Brian, then Rob, then Kurt.
I agree with Joel. I think that, I don't know that the two options you gave, Mayor, are necessarily, organization or Aaron. I think that the middle path is having it be for the manager, but not be an evaluation tool. Having it be a development tool, like Joel just said. So I think that was kind of the whole premise of this discussion, was a tool for council to get insight into the organization and the city manager's management of the organization. So that's what I would want. I don't know that it needs to be tied to his evaluation, and it could be done any time of year as a development tool.
Okay. Rob?
Yeah, I think that if Aaron wants to have a 360 review of the organization, he can do that. He can come to the council or budget committee or whatever he needs to do, if that's what he feels he needs to do. It's also potentially appropriate for him to go down the path that Joel just laid out. He could wander around and get feedback. I don't think it's appropriate for 8 counselors to be wandering around in different city offices trying to get feedback. I think that's absurd. But Aaron could do that style, or he could, choose to pay for a 360 review if he needs the input or the insight to the organization. Since we have no employees in the organization other than the city manager, doing a 360 review, or us deciding to do a 360 review of the organization without the city manager even asking us for that, would be completely inappropriate. So we can decide as counselors if we want a 360 review on our one employee, and he can decide if he needs a 360 review for the whole organization to help him manage better. But those are two distinct issues, and there should be a line between those two, and it should be obvious, I think, to everyone who's a counselor.
Kurt?
Since we are responsible for the whole organization, I think a survey of the entire organization automatically includes the manager who's part and parcel of it. But I think a direct survey on just the manager looks like a guided missile to me, so I'm in favor of the organization.
Okay, thank you. This way, DJ?
Yeah, I think you said that really well, Kurt. This conversation is evolving in such a way where we're recognizing a benefit of a 360 review, and I'm glad to hear that we need to differentiate between a 360 review and an evaluation tool. So, I could get behind something like that. I do have some clarifying questions, however. Aaron, you had mentioned that a part of the City Managers Association, you will be performing a 360 review sometime in the next 12 months. How does that differ, that 360 review and the purposes of it, from what council is talking about, its own 360 review of the organization? And my follow-up question is if they are similar in intent, going back to what Rick was touching on, if that's performed, can the council have that information and just garner the information that it seems to desire from its own 360 review? Does my question make sense?
So the 360 review that I do let me start. The 360 review that we're talking about now, sort of more of an organizational wide 360, would not suffice for what I need for my 360 review.
Okay, yeah.
And so they would still be two separate processes.
Okay, that's fair enough to leave it at that. So yeah, I guess what I would say again, I'm sort of organizational, et cetera, not to be utilized in any way what the purposes are clearly defined for a 360 review are. And one of the paramount things are not an evaluation tool. And I would encourage council, if it does want to go down the road of having a 360 review on those terms, I can get behind that. But my sentiment does remain, however, that I think it would be wise to look into our evaluation process as a separate item, because I think that we've identified some issues. that we should bring up? Should we overhaul the process? I really don't think we should do that, but could it use some new eyes, some auditing? Sure, there's new counselors up here, and we have different ideas about performance and evaluation measures. So I just want to continue to encourage that idea.
Rick?
I also like Kurt's comments. I think a 360 review of the entire organization would be a real benefit. But I also think possibly bringing in the outside person to explain this whole process to us would help clarify and satisfy many of us on the direction and what our options are and I think there's a lot of confusion, and I think an outside person would help clarify that. Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm going to go along with what Rick, whatever. I think it's important as an organization. I think it's important we have somebody outside come in and help us design that. But I don't want it to be, as Kurt so well said, a missile. So I'm in terms of the organizational part of it. And then with DJ, it's a good time for people to come together on a subcommittee and see what they want to change at the same time independently.
Vanessa?
I support a manager-focused 360 review. Just looking at the city manager evaluation form, the word staff is mentioned 10 times, and that's not something that we have any insight into and that we aren't adequately able to answer at this time. So I support the manager focus.
Okay, thank you. Did I talk to everybody? Rob?
Yeah, I support the manager focus for sure, but I also would agree with Rick that I want to hear from an outside professional as to exactly what they think and why one would be. They might say the two are completely different. They might say that it'll cost twice as much. They might say, you know, they'll be able to give us the pros and cons of combining them or keeping them separate. We don't know. We're eight amateurs here, so in this area. We should get advice from someone on the outside as to the pros and cons of Kurt's guided missile approach versus a global approach.
All right, well, we've heard from everybody, and so 6 people spoke up in favor of looking at this at an organizational 360. Obviously, that would include the manager since he oversees the organization. And everybody supports using an external consultant. So I think it doesn't need to be tied to next November. We probably want to get it done significantly sooner. Sounds like there's also some interest in reviewing this, our current evaluation process. So we have a little bit of flexibility here in the timeline of doing that. Joel?
Well, the other thing I think that hasn't been said yet, just to add to it, so when you do an organizational 360 review and there's some issues with the organization, and hopefully there are, because that's what you use to make the organization even better, then where the manager's performance evaluation comes in is how does he or she approach that, and how effective are they, and do we see changes over the next year in that? And if you see it getting worse in terms of those trends, it isn't aimed at any particular individual, it's aimed at the organization, but the manager's responsible for managing that organization, and they need to use that as an effective tool. And hopefully there's areas that are deficient, so we can, well, not because I want deficiency, but we want to make things even better. So we can correct those, and the manager then is held accountable to do that.
Yeah, I think it will end up being probably part of the evaluation process. If there are deficiencies or if everything's great, then you will know that as well, and that will give you the insight you need to answer the evaluation questions that you're currently struggling with. Although right now, since we are currently doing this year's evaluation process, you know, make yourself some notes about the questions that you struggle with so that we can do some sort of subcommittee or further discussion with Aaron and change the process a bit for next year. Do you still have something? DJ?
Yeah, just to clarify about the evaluation process, as far as timeline goes, I don't have any dream or intention of rehauling this over the next month, right? I think
This
with
year's evaluation is in progress,
Right.
so
Yeah.
the
Well,
idea
what-
is just
what-
if there are questions that you don't understand.
Excuse me, Sarah, please.
Can I
What I
clarify,
wanna-
DJ, no, stop.
What I want to
If-
clarify is, since this is a
I
dynamic
guess the
thing,
turkey can say what he wants, huh?
whatever low blow you got, I have the mic. So I would recommend that we keep an eye on it throughout the year next year in preparation for the following review.
I just said that.
Do you have anything more to say?
Do you? You're just repeating what I just said.
I want to encourage everybody to look at this as a dynamic process. I know I've attempted to utilize this to the best of my abilities and compile this evaluation list throughout the year. And I would suggest the overhaul of a review process or evaluation process be treated with the same dynamic nature. Because that's really important. I don't think that we can effectively evaluate the manager unless we all take a dynamic view throughout the year of how to evaluate the manager.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me to speak, Mayor. I'd just like to remind Council of Chapter 4, Section 4 of the City Charter that says the mayor shall chair council meetings and preside over its deliberations. The mayor shall have the authority to preserve order and to determine the order of business. Thanks.
Okay, I think we'll be talking with Aaron. He knows what he needs to do now. We will talk about, just like I said, make notes as you go through the evaluation this year, and we will be talking with Aaron about how to change that for next year, if any changes are needed. And Diana and Aaron will work on getting us an external consultant where we can shape the 360 process. How about agenda review? Rob?
Augustus suggested I bring this up at this time. I wanted to get council permission to get a recording of last week's executive session because I have not heard it, and I don't really have an hour and a half to sit at City Hall to listen to it. And I guess for protocol reasons, Karen and Aaron, feel that I can have it if the council were to approve. So I'm hoping that council will allow me to hear a recording that I can listen to at home or whatever.
Does anybody have concerns about Rob having access to that recording? Brian?
I'm okay with Rob having access to that recording as long as he doesn't make any of the information public that he hears on that recording. Thanks, Rob.
It would be hard to make it more public than it already has been, but thank you for the reminder. Our next meeting is Wednesday, where we do have another executive session on property coming up on Wednesday. We also have a public hearing to do that second reading of the RCC annexation. Council action item is a resolution amending the CEDC bylaw. Oops, sorry, that one got moved. Resolution approving application of for the Affordable Housing SDC program, a resolution of an option agreement and memorandum of understanding regarding, that one is also moved. Sometimes I go through and cross these out. Didn't do that today. How about a motion on the Briggsway annexation fee waiver? A motion on Oregon paid leave insurance equivalent plan, a resolution on the growers market lease agreement renewal, a motion on selecting a beaver sculpture for the beaver parking lot, a resolution for managing an agency agreement. Is that regarding that's the Urban Renewal Association doing that? Why does it have URA off on the left?
Which number again?
It's the bottom consent calendar item, urban renewal, so we're gonna switch into urban renewal for that?
Yeah, yes, we are. Yep.
Okay.
We will.
And then we have two different committee task force appointments to make. We have the Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force, as well as the Bikeways Committee. Then November 14th workshop, we'll talk about the time, place, manner for Measure 109 on psilocybin, and hear the third quarter work plan update. And Aaron, I was interested in maybe, could we do the executive session performance evaluation maybe that day instead of Wednesday night? Just because I think November 16th might be a substantial meeting for us.
I don't have any objections to that. I think as long as the council president has enough time to, which is just 2 extra days in advance, that should be okay.
Okay, we could potentially do it the next week too, but just maybe not on November 16th. I guess just to briefly give an update on agenda-related items. You guys have probably all seen the statement that I put out over the weekend, but assuming we would be moving forward at all on a potential building purchase, we were looking at doing an informational meeting probably around the 10th, and then having a vote on November 16th. So that's why I'm predicting that meeting may get a fair amount of public comment, and we don't need to do something, additional that night. All right, Val?
I just want to add, and I don't see it on here, but I believe it's November 17th, there's a strategic planning evening meeting, am I correct? I think I saw it on the, I saw it somewhere. I didn't see it on the calendar.
On this calendar, 6 p.m. on November 17th.
Yes.
Is it on this calendar? It's on this November calendar.
Yeah,
Okay,
the November
thank you.
calendar
Okay.
here, so that would be the public meeting,
Okay,
community forum where people could give input for strategic planning.
okay.
All right, anything else we need to get on here? All right, how about a
Motion to adjourn.
thank you, second? Kurt with the second. All in favor of adjourning today, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I
I think she was just late there. She wasn't opposed. Sorry, Vanessa. We are adjourned. See you Wednesday evening.
certainly not opposed.